Money is not as stable as you think. What you earn today is already changing in value tomorrow, even if your salary stays the same. Prices rise quietly, sometimes so slowly you barely notice, until your usual groceries cost more, your rent increases, and your savings suddenly feel smaller than before. That is inflation at work. But there is another side most people rarely think about, a situation where prices fall instead of rise. Sounds like a relief, right? Cheaper goods, cheaper services, more buying power. Yet beneath that surface lies a different kind of danger: deflation. It can slow economies, freeze jobs, and make debt harder to escape. The truth is, inflation and deflation are not just economic theories discussed in classrooms or financial news. They are invisible forces shaping your daily decisions, your lifestyle, your future, and even your survival in the modern economy. Whether you realize it or not, you are already living under one of them more than the other. So the real question is not what they are, but which one is quietly shaping your life right now, and how it is doing it without you noticing.
Inflation and deflation are two opposing economic forces that quietly shape the value of money in everyday life. Inflation occurs when prices of goods and services rise over time, meaning your money buys less than before. Deflation is the opposite, where prices fall and money gains purchasing power. At first glance, falling prices may sound good, but both phenomena carry deep consequences for individuals like you and I. To understand which one affects us more, we must first understand how they operate in real economies. Inflation is often driven by increased demand, higher production costs, or expansion of money supply by central banks. When too much money chases too few goods, prices rise. This means essentials like food, transport, rent, and healthcare gradually become more expensive. Even if your salary increases, it often struggles to keep pace. Over time, inflation quietly reduces savings value, discourages long-term holding of cash, and pushes people towards spending or investing. Deflation, on the other hand, occurs when demand weakens or supply of goods increases faster than demand. Prices drop, and consumers may delay purchases, expecting even lower prices in the future. While cheaper goods may seem beneficial, deflation can slow down economic activity. Businesses earn less revenue, cut jobs, and reduce wages. This creates a cycle of reduced spending and further price drops, often leading to economic stagnation. For you and I, the real question is not just which is better, but which is more present in our daily lives. Most modern economies operate under mild inflation rather than deflation. Central banks intentionally aim for low, stable inflation, typically around 2%. However, inflation does not affect everyone equally. People with fixed incomes or low savings feel it more strongly. Those with investments in assets like real estate or stocks may benefit because asset values often rise with inflation. This uneven impact creates a divide in how inflation is experienced across society. Deflation is less common, but can be more dangerous when it occurs. It is often associated with economic crises or recessions. Once deflation begins, it becomes difficult to reverse because people and businesses reduce spending in anticipation of further price declines. In summary, inflation is a slow, persistent force that erodes purchasing power over time, while deflation is a sharp contraction that can freeze economic activity. Understanding both is essential because they shape your financial reality more than most people realize. To fully grasp their impact, consider how inflation quietly reshapes planning for education, housing, and retirement. It forces individuals to think in terms of future cost increases rather than present prices. This anticipation influences borrowing decisions, wage expectations, and even migration patterns in search of better income stability and purchasing power across different economies worldwide. Meanwhile, deflationary environments often discourage investment, increase debt burdens in real terms, and slow innovation because businesses hesitate to expand under uncertain revenue expectations over time. This shapes long-term economic behavior significantly worldwide. Inflation and deflation are not just abstract economic terms. They are lived experiences that influence how you and I make daily financial decisions. When inflation rises steadily, it subtly changes behavior. People rush to spend money sooner rather than later because they expect prices to increase in the future. This creates a psychological shift where money feels less valuable the longer it is held. In many developing and developed economies alike, inflation is often seen in the rising cost of food, transportation, housing, and healthcare. For an average worker, this means that even if income increases, real purchasing power may still decline. This is why economists emphasize the concept of real income, which adjusts nominal earnings for inflation. Deflation introduces a different kind of pressure. When prices fall continuously, consumers may delay purchases in anticipation of even lower prices. This reduces overall demand in the economy. Businesses respond by cutting production, reducing wages, or laying off workers. As employment falls, demand weakens further, creating a downward spiral that is difficult to reverse. One important aspect to understand is that inflation and deflation are both tied to confidence. Inflation can persist when people expect prices to keep rising, while deflation deepens when people expect prices to keep falling. These expectations influence spending habits more than actual price changes in the short term. For you and I, inflation is more commonly experienced than deflation. Central banks in most countries actively manage monetary policy to avoid deflation at all costs. They often accept moderate inflation as a trade-off to ensure economic growth and stability. This is why you rarely see long periods of falling prices in modern economies. However, not all inflation is harmful. Moderate inflation encourages investment and consumption, which keeps economies active. Problems arise when inflation becomes too high or unpredictable. In such cases, savings lose value rapidly, and financial planning becomes difficult for households and businesses. Deflation, although less common, can be more damaging when it occurs. Historical examples show that deflation often accompanies severe economic downturns, where falling prices are linked with high unemployment and reduced economic activity. Recovery from deflation typically requires strong policy intervention. Understanding these dynamics helps individuals make better financial decisions, from saving and investing to budgeting and debt management. Both inflation and deflation shape the value of money over time, and ignoring them can lead to poor long-term financial outcomes. Another critical dimension is how inflation redistributes wealth within society. Debtors often benefit during inflation because they repay loans with money that is worth less than when they borrowed it, while savers lose purchasing power over time. This dynamic influences how people choose between saving, investing, and borrowing across different economic conditions and environments. In contrast, deflation increases the real burden of debt, making repayment more difficult and increasing financial stress for households and businesses. It also discourages risk-taking because falling prices reduce potential profits, leading to reduced innovation, lower investment levels, and slower overall economic progress in the long run globally. When comparing inflation and deflation, it is important to understand how they influence long-term economic stability and personal financial well-being. Inflation is often described as a hidden tax because it gradually reduces the purchasing power of money without requiring any direct action from the government or individuals. Over time, this means that the same amount of money buys fewer goods and services. For individuals, inflation affects budgeting and financial planning. A fixed salary becomes less valuable each year if it does not increase at the same rate as inflation.
This forces people to seek higher income, alternative investments, or side sources of income to maintain their standard of living. Inflation therefore pushes economic activity by encouraging spending and discouraging hoarding of cash. Deflation, however, creates the opposite effect. When prices fall consistently, people may feel wealthier in the short term, but economic activity slows down significantly. Businesses experience reduced revenue, which leads to cost-cutting measures such as layoffs and reduced wages. This further decreases consumer spending, deepening the economic slowdown. One of the most important consequences of deflation is the increase in real debt burden. As prices and wages fall, the value of money increases, making existing debts harder to repay. This can lead to financial distress for households, companies, and even governments. In severe cases, deflation can trigger prolonged recessions or economic depressions. Inflation, when controlled, is generally considered a sign of a healthy, growing economy. It reflects increasing demand, rising production, and expanding economic activity. Most central banks aim for low and stable inflation because it encourages investment and consumption while preventing the economy from overheating. However, uncontrolled inflation, often referred to as hyperinflation, can be extremely damaging. It destroys savings, creates uncertainty, and can lead to social and economic instability. Historical examples show that hyperinflation can wipe out the value of currency within a short period of time. For you and I, the key takeaway is that both inflation and deflation have direct impacts on our financial decisions, even if we do not notice them immediately. They influence interest rates, job markets, investment returns, and the overall cost of living in subtle but powerful ways. Understanding these forces allow individuals to make more informed choices about saving, spending, and investing in a constantly changing economic environment. Another key factor is how inflation interacts with interest rates set by central banks. When inflation rises, central banks often increase interest rates to reduce spending and borrowing. This makes loans more expensive, slows down consumption, and helps stabilize prices. However, higher interest rates can also reduce economic growth and increase unemployment in the short term. Deflationary environments usually force central banks to lower interest rates or even implement unconventional monetary policies to stimulate demand. Despite these efforts, restoring confidence during deflation is often difficult because consumers and businesses tend to prioritize saving over spending, expecting prices to continue falling further across the economy over time globally. This behavior can prolong economic downturns and slow recovery significantly overall globally. Inflation versus deflation is not only an academic discussion, but also a practical reality that influences every aspect of modern life. Inflation reduces the purchasing power of money over time, while deflation increases it. However, both conditions have complex effects that extend far beyond simple price changes in markets. Inflation affects consumers by gradually increasing the cost of living. Essentials such as food, housing, transportation, and healthcare become more expensive over time. This forces households to adjust their spending habits, often cutting back on discretionary expenses or seeking additional income sources. For many people, inflation feels like a constant pressure on their financial stability. Businesses are also affected by inflation. Rising input costs such as raw materials, labor, and energy can reduce profit margins. Companies may respond by increasing prices, improving efficiency, or reducing staff. These adjustments can have ripple effects throughout the economy, influencing employment levels and consumer confidence. Deflation creates a different set of challenges. While falling prices might seem beneficial at first, they often signal weak demand in the economy. Consumers delay purchases, expecting even lower prices in the future, which further reduces demand. Businesses then face declining revenues and may cut production or investment.
One of the most dangerous aspects of deflation is its impact on economic expectations. When people expect prices to continue falling, they become less willing to spend or invest. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle of reduced economic activity that can be difficult for governments and central banks to reverse. Inflation, when moderate, is generally preferred by policymakers because it supports economic growth and reduces the real burden of debt. However, when inflation becomes too high, it erodes trust in currency and destabilizes financial systems. This is why central banks carefully monitor and adjust monetary policy. For individuals, understanding inflation and deflation is essential for making informed financial decisions, whether it is saving for retirement, investing in assets, or managing debt. These economic forces play a crucial role in determining long-term financial outcomes. Ultimately, both inflation and deflation shape the economic environment in which you and I live, work, and plan for the future. Another important dimension is how inflation influences savings behavior. When inflation is high, the real value of money stored in savings accounts decreases over time unless interest rates compensate for it. This encourages individuals to seek investment opportunities, such as stocks, real estate, or other assets that may preserve or grow value more effectively than holding cash alone. Deflation increases the attractiveness of holding cash because its purchasing power rises over time. However, this behavior reduces economic circulation, which is essential for growth. When money is not spent or invested, businesses experience lower demand, leading to reduced production and employment. Over time, this weakens the overall economy and can trap it in a prolonged period of stagnation that is difficult to escape without strong policy intervention. This is why deflation is often considered more dangerous than inflation in practice globally. Inflation and deflation are two sides of the same economic coin, yet their effects on society and individuals differ significantly. Inflation refers to the gradual increase in prices over time, while deflation refers to a sustained decrease in prices. Both are influenced by changes in supply, demand, money supply, and overall economic confidence. Inflation impacts daily life in ways that are often subtle but persistent. The cost of groceries, rent, transportation, and utilities slowly increases, forcing individuals to adapt their financial planning. Wages may rise, but not always at the same pace, leading to a gradual erosion of purchasing power. Deflation, although less common, can have more severe consequences when it occurs. Falling prices may seem beneficial, but they often indicate weak economic demand. As consumers delay purchases, businesses experience declining revenues, which can lead to layoffs and reduced investment. One of the key differences between inflation and deflation lies in their psychological impact. Inflation encourages spending because money loses value over time. Deflation encourages saving because money gains value over time. However, excessive saving during deflation can further reduce economic activity, worsening the situation. Governments and central banks typically aim to maintain a low and stable inflation rate. This helps ensure economic stability while avoiding the risks associated with both high inflation and deflation. Monetary policy tools such as interest rate adjustments are used to control these economic conditions.
For individuals, inflation affects long-term financial goals, such as retirement planning, education funding, and wealth accumulation. It requires careful investment strategies to ensure that savings retain their value over time. Deflation, on the other hand, can increase the real value of debt, making it harder for borrowers to repay loans. This can lead to financial stress and reduced economic mobility for households and businesses alike. Ultimately, understanding inflation and deflation is essential for navigating the modern financial landscape, as both continue to shape economic realities worldwide. Inflation also plays a significant role in shaping investment behavior across different asset classes. When inflation is expected to rise, investors often move their money into assets that historically preserve value, such as real estate, commodities, and equities. This shift in investment patterns can drive up asset prices, creating wealth effects for some groups while excluding others who cannot participate in these markets. Deflation changes investment dynamics in the opposite direction. Investors become more risk-averse, preferring to hold cash or government bonds rather than engage in higher-risk investments. This reduces capital flow into businesses, limiting expansion and innovation. Over time, this lack of investment slows productivity growth and weakens economic competitiveness on a global scale. Deflation can create a debt deflation spiral, where falling prices increase the real value of debt, forcing borrowers to cut spending further. This reduces demand, reinforcing the downward economic cycle. Policymakers often struggle to break this cycle because traditional monetary tools become less effective when interest rates are already low. Governments may resort to fiscal stimulus or unconventional monetary measures to restore confidence and encourage spending.
Inflation versus deflation is a central concept in economics that directly affects individuals, households, and entire nations. While inflation represents a general rise in prices over time, deflation represents a sustained decline in prices. Both phenomena are influenced by monetary policy, supply and demand dynamics, and overall economic confidence. Inflation is often viewed as a normal part of a growing economy. It encourages spending and investment because money loses value over time if it is not used productively. However, when inflation becomes too high, it reduces the purchasing power of consumers and creates uncertainty in financial planning. Deflation, in contrast, is often associated with economic downturns. While falling prices may initially seem beneficial, they usually reflect weak demand and reduced economic activity. Businesses earn less revenue, which can lead to layoffs, wage cuts, and reduced investment. The psychological effects of inflation and deflation are also important. Inflation encourages consumption and investment, while deflation encourages saving and delayed spending. Both behaviors can significantly influence the overall direction of an economy. Central banks play a crucial role in managing both inflation and deflation. Through tools such as interest rate adjustments and monetary policy interventions, they aim to maintain price stability and support sustainable economic growth.
For individuals, understanding these forces is essential for making informed financial decisions. Inflation affects savings, investments, and cost of living, while deflation affects debt burdens and economic opportunities. In the end, inflation and deflation are not just abstract economic theories, but real forces that shape your financial reality every day. Recognizing how they work helps you adapt better to changing economic conditions and make smarter long-term financial choices. Inflation also influences wage dynamics and labor negotiations. As prices rise, workers demand higher wages to maintain their standard of living. Employers may grant wage increases, but these are often uneven across industries and do not always match the pace of inflation. This can lead to disparities in income growth and changes in labor market competitiveness across different sectors. Deflation also has significant implications for employment and business cycles. When prices fall, companies often experience reduced revenue, which forces them to cut costs by reducing staff or freezing hiring. This leads to higher unemployment and weaker consumer demand, which further deepens the economic slowdown. Another important aspect is how inflation and deflation affect inequality within society. Inflation can sometimes reduce the real burden of debt, benefiting borrowers over lenders, while deflation increases debt burdens, often harming those with loans or mortgages. These effects are not evenly distributed, meaning different social and income groups experience economic changes in very different ways. Ultimately, both conditions require careful policy management to maintain balance and long-term economic stability worldwide across all nations.
At the end of it all, Inflation and deflation are not enemies you can avoid. They are cycles you must understand to survive financially. One slowly reduces the value of your money, pushing you to spend, invest, and adapt. The other increases the value of money, but can quietly choke economic activity, reduce jobs, and weaken growth. For most people, inflation is the constant companion. It is present in every market, every bill, every financial decision. It reshapes how far your income can stretch and how long your savings can survive. Deflation, although less frequent, carries heavier shock when it appears, often during economic stress or uncertainty. The reality is simple but powerful. You do not control inflation or deflation, but you must learn to operate within them. Financial awareness, smart investing, and understanding economic trends are no longer optional. They are necessary tools for stability in a changing world. So whether prices are rising or falling, the real advantage belongs to those who understand what is happening early and adjust before the effects fully hit. Because in the end, it is not just about inflation versus deflation. It is about how prepared you are while the economy moves around you.